Hello and welcome to the fifth video of Google G Suite in UiPath series. In this video, we'll dig deeper into Google Calendar activities in order to create new calendar events, retrieve events from a specific calendar, or also update existing calendars. So without wasting any time, let's just go into UiPath Studio and have a look into different activities in order to automate these actions. Now once we are there in the UiPath Studio, and as you also remember from the previous videos, in order to automate the G Suite activities, we need to first install the packages related to it. And since we are using the workflow from the previous videos, we already have these packages installed. So I would not be installing these packages again. So let's just go and add a new sequence and call it Google Calendar Activities. So once we have created the sequence, as you already know that in order to automate any G Suite activities, you need to first add the application scope. So let's just search for this under activities. And we already have it here. And after adding the application scope, we need to add the client ID and the client secret. So let's just get these ID and secrets from the Google Cloud Platform. If you have not already set up this Google Cloud Platform, then have a look at the first video of this series, and the link has been attached here. So once you're here in the Google Cloud Platform, under API and Services, go to Credentials, and you would see all the credentials that you have created. Since you've already created a credential called UiPath G Suite, so just copy it. And for that, we'll first take the client ID and then copy it here as a text. And then we also need the client secret. Just as a reminder, if you go back to credentials, you would see that the credentials that we have created is under OAuth, and that is the reason why we have selected the authentication type as OAuth client ID. There are also other two types of authentications, and we have already explained this also in the first video when to use which kind of authentication. And in our case, we are already using the OAuth client ID. So with this, I would be moving forward. But before we start automating, let's just create an automation scenario wherein let's just assume that I have a website which gives the possibility to any user in order to schedule an appointment with me. And anytime there is an appointment request, I get an email with a particular subject, and I use this particular subject in order to schedule the appointment. So let's just first have a look at this email which I'm talking about, and for that I will go into my Gmail. And if you see here, there are already two mails with a subject called consultation appointment, and anytime I get an email with this particular subject, then I would schedule an appointment with that particular sender. So let's just go back to the UiPath Studio and first try and retrieve these emails. And for that, we'll be using the Gmail activities, which we have already explained in the previous videos. So if you go under Gmail, there is an option that's called Get Mail Messages. And if you see here in the input panel, there is an input that's called search expression. And this search expression is used to filter down your emails that you're looking for. And if we have a look into this, there's already a default expression. Since we're not interested from whom the email is coming from, so I would just remove this from part. And I also don't care if the mail has an attachment or not. So I'll remove this as well. What I'm only interested in is the subject of a particular mail. And in our case, the subject is nothing but consultation appointment. So I'll add that in the search expression. So with this, I will be able to get all the emails which have consultation appointment in the subject. And I would also want to get mails which are unread. So in that case, I will add another parameter here, which is called is unread. So for those who don't know how to set up this search expression, I would recommend you to watch the previous videos, and I have attached the link here on the top. And you can have a look at this video in order to see how to filter down emails in Gmail. So I'll just click on OK now. On here also there's an option that whenever I read an email, I want to mark it as read. So I'll just click on yes here. And if you see here under the output panel, we get a list of all the emails that is being returned by this particular search. So I will be saving this under a variable called email list. And with this, I will be getting all the emails with this particular subject. And now just to be sure, we'll use a message box and see if we are able to retrieve these emails. And we'll use the variable that we created previously called email list and get the first item in this email. And let's see what is the subject of this email. So since this email variable is nothing but an object of Gmail message, and this has certain attributes, and one of the attributes is the subject, so we can just directly retrieve the subject of any email. And let's just run this workflow and see if we're getting this email. And if you see here, we are able to get the subject of the first email. And let's just go back to our Gmail. And as in the message box, we have the same subject that is being displayed here. So I'll just click on OK. And now let's just go back to our UiPath Studio. And we don't need this message box anymore. So I would delete this. So as a next step, let's just set up appointments for every unread mail that we have. And since the output that we get is a list, so we'll be using a for each loop in order to iterate through this list. And the expression through which we need to iterate is our email list. And if you see here, in the type of argument, we have set as object. But since we know that the type of argument that is going to come out is a Gmail message, so I'll be changing it to Gmail message. And the reason we need to do this is because Gmail message itself is an object type and it has certain attributes. And in order to access these attributes, we will have to convert this from a default type of object to Gmail message. Having done that, I will also change the name of this from item to mail. And now we would be using the GSuite calendar activity. That is nothing but the create event activity. And for every unread email, we would be creating a new appointment. And if you see here at the properties panel, on the input, there is an option wherein you can give the calendar ID. So by default, whenever you set up a Google account, there is a primary calendar ID that is created. But it could also happen that you're adding new calendar to your particular Google account. And in that case, you would have to give the calendar ID in the input parameter. So let's just have a look on how to create this new calendar and where to get this calendar ID. For that, I would just open my Google Calendar. And if you see here, there is a list of calendars that are connected to your Google account. And if you want to add a new calendar, all you need to do is go under Settings. And you can add a new calendar here by simply clicking on Add Calendar and create new calendar, and let's just call it Consultation Appointment. And the time zone here is automatically selected depending on your Google account. And I will just click on Create Calendar. And once the calendar has been created, and if you refresh this, you would see that under the list of calendars, there is a new calendar that has been added. And now as a next step, we want the ID of this calendar. So just select this particular calendar. And if you scroll down, you would see that there is an ID that is being attached to your particular calendar here. So let's just copy this and paste it here as a text. And with this, any appointment that you set up will not be set up in your default calendar, but instead it would be set up in your newly created calendar. So now let's just add other inputs to this particular activity. And the first is the title. And let's just call it consultation appointment again. And next we need to add a list of attendees. And since it's in list, we would need this curly brackets. And in our case, we'll be sending it to the sender of the mail. So let's just use the attribute sender. And the sender itself is also an object which has an attribute called address. So we have just added the mail address of the sender here as an input. And the next input that I need is the start time. And this is something which is already available in our subject, which is over here. If you see, we have a start time of the appointment and the start date. So all we need to do is we need to extract this data from the subject. And for that, there is a VB.NET function called split, which is used to split a string with some delimiter. And in our case, the string is nothing but the subject. So we'll again use the mail object and get the subject attribute. And the delimiter in our case is a hyphen. And this expression would return a list of all these strings which are being split by this particular delimiter. So let's just get the second item. But we're still getting an error because if you see here, the kind of input that start time accepts is a DateTime variable, but we are passing it a string. So we need to convert this string into a DateTime variable. And for this, there is a function called DateTime.parseExact. So I'll be using that function. So the first parameter of this function is the string variable that we have got right now. I'll just make it bigger so that we have a better look. And then the second parameter is nothing but the format. And format in our case is DD, MM, and 4 Ys. And thereafter we have the time in hours, minutes, and seconds. So it would look something like this. And thereafter we need a format provider. Since I don't remember this, so I will just go and search for it. And most of the things are already available, so you just need to search in Google, and for us it is to convert string to DateTime. And if you see here, we have the date, the format, and then we need this variable here. So with this, we have a start time. And the next thing that I need is the end time. And since I want to have an appointment of 1 hour, so what I'll do is I'll just take the start time and add 1 hour to the start time. So let's just copy the start time. And here, since I want to add an extra hour, so there's already a function that's called add hours. So let's take this and we want to add 1 hour to the particular time. So just pass 1 as an input and say OK. And then the next input that we need is the time zone. But since I've already selected the calendar ID, it will by default take the time zone of this particular calendar ID. So you can just leave it as it is. And now let's just run it and see if the appointment has been scheduled. So as I run it, so I get an error here saying that the object reference is not set to the instance of an object. And this could happen because of the mail object here. And I see what the issue is. Since I had given mail.sender.address, instead, I need here as mail.from.address. And let's just stop this and make this correction. And instead of sender, I need to add from attribute. And now it should work. Let's just save it and run it again. So at this point, I should be able to now add even to my calendar. And if I go back to my calendar, You see here that I'm able to add a new appointment here, name as consultation appointment from 3 to 4 p.m. And since we had two mails, one was for the 18th and the other one was for the 20th. So let's just check for 20th as well. And there's another appointment that has been scheduled as well on 20th. So for us, the creation of event has worked. So let's just go back to the UiPath Studio and proceed to the next activities. So what just happened is, so we filtered on all the mails which have a subject consultation appointment in it, and it is unread. And depending on the subject, we are scheduling an appointment. But it could also happen that there is an appointment request and your calendar is already blocked. So in such cases, you would have to first check your calendar if you have free time or not. And for that, we'll be using an activity called search event. So let's just go to G Suite again. And under calendar, there'll be an activity called search events. So let's just drop it down here. And if you see here in the input panel, you need to give the calendar ID. And there are certain options that you can select in order to narrow down your search. So we have an end date and a start date. And in our case, we'll be using the start time and the end time to see if there are any events scheduled between this time. So let's just use the start time and the end time that we have used before. So this was the start time. So we get a validation error saying that the variable has not been defined. So the mail variable that you see here, it has actually been defined inside the for each loop. So I'll be moving my search event activity inside the for each loop. And now the validation error is gone. Similarly, I'll take the end time and put it under end date here. And if you see here under output, there is a variable called return events. So it is a list of all the events that come out of this particular activity. And I will create a variable called event list. So I'll be using this variable to check if there is any event within this list. And if there is even one item, then I will send a notification to the requester saying that the scheduling is not possible because the calendar is blocked and to reschedule the appointment. And if there is no item within this list, then I will schedule the appointment. So for that, we'll need an if activity. So let's just bring it here. But one thing I need to also make a correction is we need to remove this default value. And the condition for us is if there is any item in event.list. And if this event list has any item in it, and in that case, it would be sending a notification to the user. But instead of sending a notification, for us, we'll just use a message box. And in the message box, we'll just say that the calendar is blocked. So if the event list is empty, it means my calendar is not blocked and I can schedule an appointment. So I will just move this activity inside the else block. And along with that, I will also add a message box. And I would say that appointment has been scheduled. So instead of using this message box, maybe you can send a notification using the send mail message activity in Gmail. But for the demonstration purpose, we'll just leave it as it is. And let's just now try and run this workflow and see if the calendar is blocked or not. So let's just run it. So we are reading the mail and now we are going inside the for loop. And if you see, the first message that we get is that the calendar is blocked. The spelling is wrong. We could correct it afterwards. But let's see why does it say that the calendar is blocked. And if you remember, we have already run this workflow and we have already set up an appointment for this particular time. So let's just first go and remove this event from the calendar. So let's go back to the calendar and remove these events. And the appointment for the 20th of July has been removed, but we still have the appointment for 18th of July. I will leave the appointment of 18th as it is. So for the 18th of July, we'll get a message that the calendar is blocked. and for the 28th, the appointment will be booked. I will also add the subject here. So let's just run it again. So appointment has been scheduled. So for the first email, we are getting it right. And now for the next one, it says that the calendar is blocked for the appointment on 18th on 7. And in this case, we'll be sending a notification to the user and ask him to reschedule the appointment. So let's do a short recap. So what we did is we have read the email from your Gmail, and depending on the subject, we were trying to schedule an appointment. And then we are using the search event activity in order to see if for the requested appointment, our calendar is blocked or not. And if it is blocked, then we are sending a message box saying that the calendar is blocked. And if not, then we are setting up the appointment. So with this, we are in the end of this video. All the other activities related to calendar are also similar, and they are based on this search event activity. So if you're able to use this activity well, then you'll be able to use the calendar events. And so this is all you need to know about the calendar activities. I've already added the workflow to Git Repository, so go ahead and download it and check if you're able to run it as well. And if you have any question, then just feel free to comment below. And in the next video, we'll see how to use app script in GSuite activities. So stay tuned and don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Until then, keep automating.